Hello, everybody. Welcome to another MerlinCast, and we have a wonderful special guest. May have seen him before, Dr. Peter. Hello.
Yeah, happy to be back. It's been a little bit, but
Yeah, we've actually been able to do a lot more stuff lately than we were after years of plans. It seems like.
yeah. Maybe the lockdowns are a blessing in disguise because I think I've been on here. Used to be yearly, and now it's
uh,
every few months.
yeah. It's. Hey, I'm not complaining about it.
No,
And I know this was one. Basically, well, you might be on some other ones because apparently there's that top 50 movies that's been floating around. So for people's favorite movies, you might pop up on. Though I know for sure we have a movie review after this one, but we'll talk
hmm
about that later. I had to get this one out of the way first because basically, before I let you take over, as I like to do, I just kind of ask random questions because, as you might know, there's some gaps in movies that maybe I should have seen, famous ones, influential ones. We all have our gaps, right? And so I asked a couple different people uh, from the list of movies, or generally that I haven't seen, what they thought I should watch. And your pick for me was Brazil, which is the subject of our little podcast today. And really, I just told you right before we started recording, man, of course, this is super fresh. So, 2.5 hour movie. It's Brazil. So, I am going to kind of continue the processing as you speak. So, please, since this was your pick, tell me, I guess, uh, no spoilers yet, but just generally what Brazil is plot wise, if you can remember the details. And then after that, kind of why you thought it would be a good recommendation for me and a good discussion. And then maybe we can find out what we think about it.
yeah. So broadly, Brazil is Terry Gilliam's 1985 uh, dystopian science fiction, sometimes called a comedy, sometimes a satire. There's a lot going on with it. It's set in a sort of Big Brother esque society in the future in which a bureaucracy sort of runs everything, and one brave bureaucrat named Sam Lowry dreams of a better life, and
Literally.
yeah, um, takes some steps towards minor acts of rebellion, but we'll get into it more
Mhm.
as we proceed. But this is one of my favorite films. This was notable as much for the fight to release it. The studio mandated a different ending, and I think we'll probably discuss the endings a little later on in the show.
Yep.
Um, but this uh, is well known for the fight. Gilliam, I believe, took out a full page ad in Variety demanding that they release his film.
Uh,
Um, and indeed, it was released, although uh, it did not win at the Oscars, losing out to Out of Africa, which not
oh,
not a movie that I
oh,
think you need to see if you haven't seen it.
I've seen it.
Yeah, it's
Eh,
yeah, it
it's fine.
was it's indicative of the kind of movies that won in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
Although the Los Angeles Film Critics Association did give Brazil Best Picture, Screenplay, and Director. Although, whether it is as great as some would say, I think we can maybe discuss.
Yes, I guess that is part of it. I mean, obviously, well, I'm still going to leave it kind of in your court right now because I believe this was on your list of one of your favorite films, right? Which is, I'm
Yeah.
guessing, what prompted you to say, well, you got to see that one. Why did you pick this one for me though? Because it's interesting. Each person I asked, I only really asked three, you, Dan, and Justin, but they all gave me kind of different answers
Mhm.
with a different logic behind them. Dan's was Casablanca just because he was thinking, okay, big movies, that obvious ones I haven't seen to get off the list, kind of practical. Justin kind of knows that I've got some gaps in my Kurosawa, so I think he picked one of those for me. Uh, And then you, I'd imagine, well, it's a science fiction thing, or is it something else?
Yeah, science fiction's definitely part of it. This is one of the not biggest by any means. It's not a financial success, but generally one of the better thought of science fiction films of the 80s. And it's one that I think is a little bit different. It's the sort of thing that a lot of people just haven't seen, they've maybe heard of. It's not Blade Runner, for instance, which also not a big financial hit, but everybody's seen Blade Runner by this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Gilliam, I think, is an interesting director and has a pretty wide range, especially in this period where he sort of this is his time bands before this. He ends up following this up with Fisher King, 12 Monkeys, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, before the ongoing, although I believe it's actually been released, Man from La Mancha, his efforts to make the film over the course of something like 20 years. But I think Gilliam's a great director who doesn't get enough conversation, who was the zeitgeist in the 80s and 90s, which is an area that I think that you often talk about. We've certainly had a lot of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of that Tim Burton caliber, although as Burton's star continued to rise, Gilliam's sort of fell, albeit due to forces far outside of his control.
Hmm. Okay. Well, you gave me a little bit of background on it. I think the interesting thing about going into this is that this is a movie that, uh, despite I think the fact that it could be sort of up my alley, I somehow avoided not only not ever seeing it, I knew almost nothing about it.
Mhm.
I never saw a scene. I could literally list, let's see, I knew it was Terry Gilliam. I knew it was like a dystopian George Orwell sort of thing. I knew that I'd seen a couple clips of the him flying with the wings,
Mhm.
and the baby is the horrifying image of the baby mask is pretty iconic. And I knew Robert De Niro was in it for some reason. That was about
Mhm.
it. That was about it, man. And I guess, well, I don't know, man. Where do you want to start? Because I mean, this is, I don't know. Where do you want to just know how I generally
Yeah,
felt
I
first?
think start with your first impressions. Like you said, this is fresh in your mind.
Man, it's
I've
fresh.
seen this film, I don't know, half a dozen times
Okay,
more.
okay.
So what's yours
My I guess take, so to
as
speak.
the first time viewer?
As the first time viewer, I definitely could tell that there are some of those Gilliam trappings. I was kind of actually making some notes as I went
Mhm.
along just to see if like I wanted to pick up on some things that were recurring. But yeah, there were some things that were just kind of standard. Like, yeah, with Gilliam, I was thinking a lot about 12 Monkeys. Like, you've got a lot of the extreme uncomfortable close-ups. You've got a lot of interesting odd angles. You've got a lot of dolly work. I think my my biggest impression, well, I guess there are two. First of all, I think that if you wanted to imagine what it would be like if bureaucracy took over everything to the utmost extreme, and you relied too much on rules, too much on policy, too much on government, this is like the extreme example of that. And I the metaphor I thought of was, which they kind of allude to a little bit when he's calling to get his heater repaired. Uh, Basically, he calls into the department of whatever it was, and of course he's got like the classic recording because there's nobody there, and like, oh, we're sorry, due to staffing we can't help you right now, bye. And that's basically the whole movie. That's the if all of if you could kind of summarize it with that theme, this is just that concept of being on hold, trying to get hold of some institution. That's this as a movie. That's like
Mhm.
if this was just government to a T, where it's almost trying to overcorrect, but it's also flawed. And when it sees its flaws, it just tries to correct it with a correction, and it just makes it worse. Like with, for instance, just the Bob Hoskins and the other guy come in as the repairman, and they keep coming in trying to fix everything, tearing it up, and then by continuing to fix it, they just make it worse and worse and worse. And use bureaucracy to basically take his house from him. And everybody was so indoctrinated by following policy that it's just kind of an excuse. And one of the great visuals of that, for instance, was how people react to the terrorists, because of course there's a rebel group that's trying to take down this horrible society, but everybody is so ingrained by following policy. And of course there's obviously a focus on entertainment and the media there, that literally there's an explosion all around people and they're just moderately annoyed by it, like, oh, it's a terrorist attack, how what a nuisance. And it's like this horrifying stuff around them, but they're so desensitized from everything because of distractions and because of the routine and just this complete faith in bureaucracy, because everything in their society, every position is government run, everything is a government department. So like it almost seemed like it could be kind of dark socialism, because it was like there was an independent contract. Everything was just, which was weird because I have never, I mean, usually I have not really seen, in all honesty, I guess outside of, I mean, obviously there is some fascist elements there
Mhm.
because, you've got a lot of the security forces are SS and they're monitoring people. Obviously it's more of a totalitarian thing, but it's in the guise of it. It doesn't think that it is, like, there's no figurehead. It's just bureaucracy and the idea of trying to make things more efficient, which I'll be honest, that's more of like I have rarely ever seen socialism
Mhm.
portrayed in a darker way. And I, I like some of those concepts, obviously, but this showed that too much bureaucracy and too much reliance on it can be a bad thing, because if there was a rule that was instituted and somebody couldn't fight against, like, I'm sorry, it's the rule. And that's what people keep saying to him, like,
Mhm.
I'm innocent, there was a mess up in the paperwork, like, I'm sorry, nothing I could do, it'll be more expensive if you don't just confess now. It just got it, just there's literally no way around it. If there was a mistake, they just try to cover it up because the government can't make mistakes. So they got to keep up that illusion. So that was one thing I picked up on.
Mhm.
In a much more condensed way, though. The other thing besides that thematic metaphor was just, uh, in addition to being considered, one of like the really great sci-fi movies, I've seen it really is up on lists. It's also has been considered to be one of the great surrealist films, and I can see why, because the whole film kind of has this almost dreamlike quality to it, and Lowry kind of is going in and out of these experiences about, what's actually going on with this conspiracy he may have fallen into versus his fantasies. And of course, as we go further along, the lines seem to blur, but I had a hard time telling because the whole film is tonally
Mhm.
like that. So it's like that's interesting that I'm like I wasn't really sure what was going on there towards like the last 20 minutes of the film, because I was really kind of going back and forth. But getting back to my point, just in terms of the technicals of this movie, in addition to the obviously great camera work and the editing, really the costuming. And I think if there was, this might be one of the greatest examples of using production design and set design to build a world and make it a character in and of itself, just with all the, like, the offices, for instance, just with the paper everywhere, the pipes, really creating this claustrophobic, chaotic sense of, yes, bureaucracy's a mess. And I can't say that it's necessarily the most subtle thing I've ever seen, but it's not the most overt either, you know?
Yeah, I think it's an important point because it's not just socialism bad. It's not. It's bureaucracy bad. It's, as you said, we get those elements of like SS guards. That we do have the secret police. We do have a militarized police in there. Um, but there's also that point that no, everyone doesn't care. They're more concerned about their Christmas shopping than the explosion that went off next to them.
Exactly, and that was another thing too, and that was actually another little design element that I really I love, like all the practical stuff in this movie is made. We haven't even talked about some
Mhm.
of it yet, but like that little thing there too was very, very classic 1984 Orwellian, dystopia, where you've got TVs everywhere and a lot of cycling of classic films which were referenced a lot, but everybody everybody is so desensitized from the problems around them that kind of ties into what happens later on with Sam. Is I remember when he basically finds out that there was a mix-up with the initial person that they captured, thinking it was a terrorist, and they found out that a funny little thing is they actually bill people for arresting them.
Mhm.
It's like almost something you could like pay to get out of if you want. It's really bizarre. And so he finds out, oh, like, okay, this was a mix up. I'm going to go actually return this bill because they were overbilled. I'm going to deliver it to the woman directly, the wife. And she's like, oh, my husband's, what's happened to him? Is he dead? He's dead. She's having this traumatic moment. And he's more concerned about the fact that she was overbilled than they accidentally killed her husband. And then like he realizes this is kind of awkward. He doesn't know how to deal with this emotional connection. He doesn't deal with these things very often because he's always deflecting. He literally just kind of turns to the TV screen and like tries to like get into the show and make conversation about it, but can't avoid that. And everybody's like that. They can just turn to the
Mhm.
television, whatever's on TV. They're just all completely not even oblivious, but they just don't care about what happens to anybody else outside of their own need to fulfill their duties. Though there is also some, it's weird how there's like a socialist element fused with the fascist element to the government in the movie, but there's also kind of a classist issue
Mhm.
because he's only where he is continuously because his mother is kind of in a higher society and is pulling strings, and she knows people higher up, like the head of the whole section of government, basically.
Yeah, there's sort of a equal opportunity offender. It's sort of challenging all aspects. There is that sort of attack on capitalism and the idea that maybe we're promoting people that aren't actually equipped to deal with stuff because they know the right people, they went to the right schools, or uh, took the right test. And I think that it does. Uh, I mean, I think a lot of this is comes out of the human experience. Who among us hasn't gotten annoyed at be standing in the DMV for an hour and then told, "Oh no, you actually need to go across the road and do this." Oh, okay.
You've got to go to this office and get this
Yeah.
form and sign it this way.
Yeah.
Oh, it was filled out this way. Nope, has to be filled out in this column. What? You got to
Yeah.
go
Well,
back in
I
line.
gotta get it notarized. Can you do that here? No, you have to go find,
Oh, classic
yeah.
bouncing around.
Yeah,
Oh,
any kind of, yeah, any kind of,
red tape.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you get that with, dealing with a bank account or a traffic ticket or anything, even not, these bureaucracy rears its head. If you've ever tried to cancel a cable subscription, you're going to talk to six different people before they'll let you cancel. But uh,
Exactly. The headaches.
yeah,
No,
um,
you're right. That's absolutely a very universal experience. And I think that I'm guessing one reason you probably like it, maybe a lot of people do, is Sam Lowry is a great everyman character because he clearly is kind of in this dead end job that he really is stuck in, and he's actually so comfortable with it, though even though he dislikes it, he doesn't want that promotion. That's kind of the irony of it. So he's likes to be stuck in his discomfort because it's more comfortable for him, and he's also been pushed around by his mother a lot, so he's not really sure what he even wants, but he knows he's trying to kind of escape through his fantasies this world around him that he just can't deal with, and that kind of leads into what happens to him essentially. But that idea of just kind of being in the dead end job, dealing with the office bureaucracy, a lot of jabs at, like when he goes to, is it the Department of Information Retrieval? Is that where he gets promoted
yeah,
to? That he gets promoted, he goes up there, which is really this ominous place. I love the one of the really cool things tonally about this movie, how they kind of do a lot with little, is even though you know that they're in this industrialized city, they somehow seem like they're very isolated all the time. Like when he's alone in the apartment or when he is in that office building, there there's nobody around except for everybody just following the boss around, which is very bizarre looking when you first see it. Like, what is going on? So it's very off-putting. It's very uncomfortable. But when he gets there, he's like, "Oh, congratulations! You have your own office with your own door and your own number." And then he just actually says, "Congratulations, D718," instead of his actual name. Like, okay, you're just a number here. That's a classic feeling, and that kind of, I think, ties into ideas of identity and individuality that are also probably prominent as well for his journey as a character.
Yeah, I think of that scene a lot where he gets promoted, but it's a broom closet, and he shares the desk. He gets his own office, but he's sharing a desk with the person
Yeah,
next
there
door,
the
and
cut
they
the cut in the wall, and they can shove it aside.
yeah,
By the way, he was one of my favorite minor characters. Was the guy the in the
yeah,
office next door? He
yeah,
was a nice guy. Nice
yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, and that was I forget. I wanted to mention it, but also just the design of the technology. I kind of like how it is that sort of 1950s fused with futuristic, but kind of retro, where the computers are kind of like typewriters with different pipes and baubles, but they have almost like this digital advanced flat screen that looks really
Hmm.
cool. I just really it's like little details like that that really make this pop. The visuals of it really bring it to life.
Yeah, it's that right mix of sort of like future tech, but old tech, but current day stuff.
Oh, and I want to point out here because a nice touch, by the way. I'm pretty sure your background is a shot of the film
Yeah,
when they temporarily leave the city and they reveal that it's kind of all a
yeah,
desolate wasteland.
yeah. When they're driving along, and you have these nice looking vistas, but then no, it's a wasteland. It's a
Uh,
desert.
it is, and I didn't realize that pollution was such a big thing until they
Hmm.
kind of have that that great scene where the house gets moved in place of this giant factory in the background. But just kind of going along with that, other things I was thinking about it were I really love. I don't know if you know this, but I love obviously I love good practical effects, special effects. Um, not even getting to some of the other effects of the movie, but just those like that shot there when they're walking through the city. There's some I know I think Gilliam with some of his previous films and I think with his work in Monty Python really likes to play with forced perspective. So
Hmm.
you've got a lot of that, and there's the dream sequence kind of ties in really cool with that. I thought was done well, but just the uses of miniatures, like some of the miniature work here, you can tell like is amazing. I was some of the best I've ever seen. Obviously, utilizing a lot of really good close-ups and lighting to kind of hide that a little bit, but it's you can kind of tell some of it is obviously that way, but because it's so dreamlike, it doesn't really matter. It fits very well with the style of the film and the world around him. I think the buildings.
Yeah, it's a unique style. I mean, there are others. I think of Jean-Pierre Junot, City of Lost Children, or Delicatessen, which has a similar aesthetic. Even RoboCop from a few years later kind of does. I think the buildings in RoboCop looking, especially the OCP building, looking kind of like something out of this film.
Hmm.
Doesn't quite have the same sort of impact on aesthetics that Blade Runner does, but it is there, and it is, yeah.
Well, that was something I wanted to kind of ask you about because you're right. Blade Runner is another good example of that, and I think Blade Runner, just in terms of once again the same thing. I think kind of really building the city. I feel like there's a lot more detailed model work in Blade Runner, and I think some of the camera movement, you have a lot of those aerial shots where you kind of get a sense of the whole city, and also, I mean, I think I want to say that there was probably more utilization of location filming. I'm not sure, and I wanted to ask you though, with Brazil. Something that I think differentiates it from Blade Runner is it seems like it has this aesthetic of being, I think it said $15 million was the budget, so it was, I guess, relatively a relatively low budget movie, but they seem like there still was they were really managing to create like this really big world with a lot of detailed effects work and kind of utilizing what they had to work with. So it seems almost like a small scale movie at times, but at other times you can just see like the detail of like in the backgrounds you read. I don't know if it's like it doesn't look as polished as Blade Runner, but then again, I feel like it's not supposed to. Like it's
Mhm.
messy, it's dirty, and so it's like some things you could tell are maybe more plaster and it's dust and muck, but and there's a lot of like scenes that take place like in little narrow alleyways, and you think, okay, this is definitely a set, but it's just a really well put together set, and that's what I mean. It seems like they're so isolated when they're there, so it kind of works for the weird dreamlike quality of the movie, I think.
Yeah, and I think it works with this bureaucracy world where nothing really gets fixed or it's temporary. We see that with the apartment. But like, how much of this is some alley that was put together by some bureaucrat that decided that this is where the alley should go without any actual understanding of foot traffic or anything. There's a lot of little oddities in this movie
Hmm.
that might have just been uh, the low, 15 million was not super low budget for 1985, but definitely not a giant budget.
No, and I was like 15 million sounded like a decent amount. It's funny to think of that as small budget, but I guess I don't know in comparison to Blade Runner. I feel like Blade Runner probably had more money behind it.
Yeah, Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner was around 30 million, and it's a few years earlier.
Mhm.
Even Batman was not. Batman was mid 40s and for budget.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, so you know
So
what I mean. So
yeah,
it's not a big production. It just it felt like a slightly smaller movie, but you could still tell there was
yeah,
money put into it,
yeah,
which I appreciated.
yeah. In a way that movies in the 80s you could tell because of the use of miniatures and the use of matte paintings, and
Hmm.
yeah, we didn't have CGI. You couldn't. You could make something like Brazil today, but it wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't feel like this. And I think that's part of the appeal to me, is that it evokes that feeling of the mid '80s, and it has a sort of uh, urban decay feel in the way that RoboCop does as well. A few years after this, and Batman, and a lot of these other movies are sort of playing in this grim, grimy, bleak future.
Hmm.
It's not the full apocalyptic Mad Max style future, but still is not necessarily a place that you'd want to live.
No, not pleasant. And speaking to your point about, because I've been holding off about this for some of the effects work. I wanted to say that the shot, some of the shots where his dream sequences,
Mm-hmm.
where he is flying as an angel, or as I actually thought it was more like Icarus, the
Yeah,
as what they were kind of going for there, where he's flying through the air in the sky. Um, that was one of the most beautifully put together effects pieces I've seen, because clearly he's got to be on a harness, suspended with like blue screen or matte painting, but not all of them were perfect. But where he is flying in the air, uh, it looks seamless, and I'm
yeah.
I'm just and I thought that was impressive, and I really and I could tell more, even more of the aesthetics. I'm not as familiar with, I think Time Bandits, but the some of the fantastical elements of Terry Gilliam's style, in terms of his creature design
Mm-hmm.
and costuming for the fantasy sequences, just made me think it kind of reminded me a little bit of some of the, obviously had a lot of the fantasy movies in the 80s. I think Dragon Slayer, Willow, and Excalibur.
Yeah,
They kind of have that also kind of dreamlike weirdness to them, but also a little like it's not full camp. Like this was like I kind of wanted to honestly see just this part of the film, and it kind of made me think that these dream sequences were so elaborate that he just wanted to make two movies and shove them together, because literally they're a huge part of the runtime. They're not like brief scenes, and just him running around. His armor looks really cool. The sword is effective. The woman, the princess who's floating kind of in the air with these thin garbs, looks very majestic and strange, and also just the the creatures, the baby faced weird
mm-hmm.
monstrosities,
Mm-hmm.
and also my favorite, also another one of my favorite compliments, just in terms of editing and cinematography, is this has one of my favorite uses of forced perspective I've ever seen, is when he's fighting
Mm-hmm.
the weird samurai thing, and it's obviously, they're not to scale, just some other guy in a suit, but they do a simple thing where he looks like he's much bigger by filming from the lower angle, but the cutting of each blow when he battles against him as the sword clangs with the spear was very very seamless, very effective, and I was very impressed by that. And then later, when things start to blend over and he kind of hallucinates one guard, one SS sort of guy, as the weird samurai monster, they shift that perspective again, and I thought that was just Very well done. The timing of that.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, again, it's this restrictions breed creativity. They didn't have they couldn't rely on CG and didn't have the budget to do an actual giant puppets or anything. So they made it work with what they had, but it added to the dreaminess of this and the strangeness and the
Hmm.
as you said earlier, even the uh, quote unquote waking world still has this veneer of dreamlike quality to it. It's
Hmm.
a little bit strange, and there's
And
always
it's
this
it's
feeling.
absolutely, and I think that's the strangeness mostly comes from how everybody interacts because it's that off-putting. Nobody really seems to care about all the things that are obviously wrong, and it's just and the little things like everything obviously exaggerated. Like you've got every single person in the office following the boss around, but until you have context for that, it just looks like these weird, mad, crowd of people dodging slowly in between the hallway, and it looks really creepy and bizarre. Like, and if you aren't familiar with the area, you're like, what's going on here? So that you're right, that whole dreamlike area is even though he knows the world, it still seems odd to us,
Mm.
no matter what, even though he fully accepts it. And he's just so deeply ingrained in it, and it's fascinating. But yeah, I liked those dream sequences as well. Also, a great effect where the ground kind of morphs into this thing that grabs him, and it looks like it's somebody he knows. That was a amazing effect too. I'm
Yeah,
like that. I believe that arm. That was plaster. I don't know what that was, but that was an amazing effect.
yeah. I don't actually own any of the Criterion versions of this, but I should just to
Got to get it.
see the behind the scenes making of. Yeah, I have a non-special edition from a few years ago.
Dang it.
But yeah, it sounds like I need to get a hold of my. There is a like a 5 disc Criterion floating
Ooh,
around somewhere.
how much is that going to cost? I wonder.
Probably too much, but just for the behind the scenes,
It'd be worth it.
yeah, the how did they do all of this on that budget? But
Absolutely, man. No, I just I think it's very interesting, and I think that was the thing that it took away from the most, just from a technical perspective, is just how well put together the movie really is. You know. Um. Hmm. Any other probing questions or anything? Those are sort of my general. I feel like I didn't even summarize. I kind of went off on tangents as I was sort of I guess discovering it a little bit.
yeah, but I think that's part of the movie is that the feel is more important than the plot.
Yeah, I guess that was sort of my next question was how do you because I mean I guess it's pretty simple initially because he dreams of a woman who is kind of caught up in this plot. They think she might be connected to the terrorist attacks, but that's a mistake, or is it? And he's dreaming about her, but is compelled by that because it's like, why am I dreaming about this woman? And feels he's in love with her, and he kind of, I guess maybe it's because of the line between he's trying to lean more towards fantasy anyway as a distraction,
Hmm.
that he delves into that because he seems to feel that he's in love with her just because he's dreaming of this fantasy woman and is compelled to follow her and save her. And I was getting some strong Don Quixote vibes, especially when we get to a certain scene where people seem like they're coming to the rescue, and Robert De Niro's is it Tuttle? Tuttle is
Yeah,
kind of gave me like a very Robin Hood, help man of the people knight kind of guy. So there is definitely some like, and obviously with his dream sequence fantasy, the knight in shining armor wants to save the princess, and that's I was really getting some Don Quixote sort of vibes from all that, and I was kind of fine with that, but it was just like that was a little odd to me that he kind of delved so much into that, and that was the excuse. But I could kind of buy that. Actually, one of the things I had the most difficult time with, at least initially, and I just kind of eventually went with it anyway because I liked her, was the fact that she doesn't she kind of gives in to his persistence, which I guess was kind of played for amusement. And she doesn't immediately. She's like, okay, who's this weird guy? That's basically I'm almost arrested. He tries to save me. Then he's like impersonating an officer, trying to get me out. And she literally spends that sequence on the truck trying to just throw him off with all her turns and everything. And she, I guess, finds him amusing and charming. I didn't quite get what, like, at first I thought, okay, this there well, okay, what my favorite, one of my favorite laughs in the movie, because I would say this is a dark comedy. Would you agree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I was like, I had a couple, but not many. I was like, a lot of it I thought was kind of dark and disturbing, to be completely honest with you, especially towards the end. But the one of the funniest parts of the movie was, which made me think, okay, this has to be a dream, because this is an everyman sort of thing. Was when he's in the truck with her trying to escape, and she's like, "Oh, you're so handsome. You're just my type." He's like, "Oh, really?" You're like, "Oh yeah, we should like totally go out together or something." And it's like, "Oh, why are you so surprised?" And oh, I'm just never this lucky. He's like, "You're still not," and throws him out. And I was like, "Yeah, I saw that come, but that was great." I'm like, "Yeah, that's a lie." I wasn't sure what was going on with it, but that was a great setup. And there's just a lot of little things like that that I think really sell to those relatable moments. Like, yeah, I'm like, wow. Even in this bizarre world, I'm like, no, there's no way that the lady he's pursuing is going to make it that easy. That doesn't typically go that way.
Yeah, it's one of those things, because it's so dreamlike. We don't really know what is reality.
Exactly. And she even says something along those lines, like, you've got no sense of it anyway. And they kind of play with that later on.
Mm.
Like, okay, what is his relationship to her? When is she with him? And when, and it's once again done so seamlessly, and the whole thing's dreamlike, you're not really sure which sequences are actually happening to her.
Hmm.
And that you're absolutely right. So I was like, well, that could be real, I guess, but I guess it makes a little more sense later on. But I wanted to say too, I don't know that it was a Jill, right? Jill Layton was the character. Um,
Yeah.
I actually really liked the character. I thought that she was kind of a sort of an every woman in the sense that she seems like she's out of her depth too, and she's also I like the fact that she was a strong character, strong
Hmm.
female character, where she was obviously like resisting this guy, like, don't touch me. And of course he asked permission, and also she wasn't taking any crap. She's tough. She's driving the big truck, so she's kind of challenging gender stereotypes. I kind of liked that, and she really is kind of a take no names person, but she's not overly done to be like some sort of action hero like Ripley or something. She's just kind of a person trying to get through her day, and just kind of look out for herself. And I really believed that. And she also just had like this kind of plucky cuteness about her that I thought really kind of worked well with him. So I really liked her as a character, which I wasn't expecting to. She was how they handled her was very interesting as like the personified like damsel in distress, but also not at all at the same time, just
Yeah,
as a person.
yeah. They Sam may put her on a pedestal, but the movie doesn't. It kind of
Yes,
it keep she's grounded and real, um, insofar as it can be with
a movie like this.
wonky dream sequences. And
Then the plot.
yeah, um, and yeah, we don't. I mean, we're seeing the movie through Sam's eyes, so we don't know how much of this is real or not. As you could probably have endless debates over at what point do the daydreams start, what parts of reality are
Hmm. Because yeah,
him
it's almost
imagining.
like yeah, I guess his the Quixotean thing comes back where he might be sort of a lot of those things bleed in and out. You're right.
Hmm.
You're right. Yeah, man, going back, I could see going back to this, just not only just trying to figure it out, but really just a lot of the little details, really just like
Hmm.
how they put things together would just be cool visually to check that out. Um, yeah, I think that was it for that. I guess, do you think that now, speaking of that point, may be a good time to talk towards spoilers and the ending esque or anything else?
Yeah, I think we can proceed to the end.
Okay.
Obvious spoilers, although um, it's complicated.
It is complicated. I will say, if anybody's watching or listening at this point now, we're gonna get into more spoilers here. So if you're interested in Brazil, sounds intriguing. watch it first, then come back. But to be fair, you could also maybe watch this and you might not have all the answers, but I kind of have my thoughts. Maybe Peter will correct me because he's seen the film more. Um, yeah, you said you thought that you weren't sure when it was cut off, and I thought it was made pretty clear when it was cut off.
Yeah, well,
Literally.
yeah,
uh,
I think there's a case to be made that the dream sequence starts with Sam and Jill's night of passion before
mm,
the police show up.
mhm.
Um, but we don't know because they make a reference to her maybe not have been, maybe she wasn't there, where he asks, oh, where is she, and somebody's like, who?
Yeah, I guess
But
you're right. Yeah.
yeah, but it's the bureaucracy. But we also, she may have been shot immediately. It's left deliberately unclear, and we don't exactly know what he was alleged to have done. Was he going, is he facing torture because he changed the records? Is that the treason? Is it because he's supporting a terrorist? Is it because maybe he was the person that bombed the department store?
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I was wrong. There are a lot of other cases where it could have picked up because there was that great scene where he's I love how they literally bag people. They put people in these like
Yeah.
burlap sacks and just shove them away. And they got him in this office where he's being talked to by who knows how many bureaucrats from different departments. And the one guy basically reads off the list of all the charges, and you're like, they aren't listed in any particular order of what is considered the worst. Like, oh, like one of them was obviously like associating with a terrorist or like destruction of property, theft, and then another one was like not going through proper channels to deliver that bill to that lady. Like that's also you're right. You're like, wait, what is the bigger offense? Because they're all talking like, well, deal with this quickly or it'll run up your credit. Like, so is
Hmm.
him not being like what if he gets out of this he can pay like they're basically he might end up getting killed, but they still want him to go through the process easier to make their jobs easier so that it'll be less costly and less time consuming, even though his life is on the line. So
Yeah.
once again, the bureaucracy and following policy is more important than everything, and it takes away the humanity. It is secondary. So, but you're right. It does kind of bleed in and out. And I thought initially that okay, when when Jack his friend we think is
Hmm.
basically gonna start who's the guy that tortures people is gonna start basically torturing him, and Robert De Niro comes in and with a bunch of people and there's a big shootout, and I'm thinking okay, this is questionable. And then there's more weird dream sequences. I'm like, what? It was the last 20 minutes was so confusing. I was like, I admit I'm not sure what's going on. But then they got that hard cut where they basically tell you or heavily
Yeah.
imply one ending where he's okay, he actually was tortured, he was not rescued, and he's basically gone insane, and he's now completely in his fantasy. Um, although it, I want to say that the movie kind of had. I mean, like I definitely would agree with you, dark comedy, but it had some laughs here and there, but for the most part, I thought there were elements of discomfort and creepiness mixed in with the quirkiness. But the last 20 minutes or so of the movie, like from the time they're captured to when he's like talking to the different guards and his boss comes in dressed as Santa, like, and he's about to be executed or whatever. And that whole sequence where the long dolly of his friend and the weird baby mask coming to slowly, torture him. Like that whole sequence, that section of the movie is like very disturbing and uncomfortable. It wasn't fun anymore. And the dreamlike nature really kind of goes in to Max. And the ending, I wanted to say, literally, I think one of my first thoughts after watching the movie was, I think that's what they call a bittersweet ending, and emphasis on the bitter. I think
Yeah, I mean, I love the ending, because he wins. That
he's free, right?
Sam, yeah, Sam wins. He doesn't take down the bureaucracy. He doesn't defeat the dystopian state, but
But
he
in his mind,
wins.
he did.
Yeah,
In his mind, he got everything he
and
wanted. Yeah.
yeah, and you have that moment of Jack, like, frustrated, um, maybe, or maybe happy for his friend, or
It's like, oh,
it's
he's not
that.
with us anymore. He's gone.
Yeah, the recognition that no matter what they do, they can't get to him anymore, and he's freed himself finally and completely.
From the bureaucracy. There's something they couldn't touch, and that was just his imagination, and I guess tied with that his desires and his like what his mother says, about ambitions and hopes and dreams, and he kind of concealed that, I guess, and maybe wasn't in touch with that, and maybe throughout the film he gets more in touch with who he really is through those fantasies, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, he gets to live the life that he wanted to. He gets to uh, be with the woman of his dreams, and gets that happily ever after ending, which is the studio did not wanted it to end there with him and Jill driving off to the
Oh,
countryside.
to the Irish country or whatever with the little cabin.
Yeah,
I was like, I was thinking as they were doing, like, that does seem nice. I'd much rather live there, the simple country life, than this horrible, plaster city of terrible bureaucracy. But so the studio wanted to cut it there. Uh,
yep, yeah, yeah. That was the fight. There was, I think, other things that studio wanted that Gilliam didn't, and things that he wanted that led to the epic.
Showdown.
Uh, yeah, that Gilliam won. Even if it didn't make a lot of money, I think historically we recognize its importance.
Yeah, that was something I didn't have a chance to look up too much because I figured you'd probably have some knowledge and research, and I wanted to just kind of go fresh. I did look up a little about the budget. I saw that I guess it didn't do very well financially, but did it do well critically initially, or is this one that was loved later?
Yeah, this was one that got a lot of attention. It did get some Oscar nominations. I know it got screenplay
Hmm.
or nominated. I think it. I don't remember whether it lost to Out of Africa. I
Oh,
guess it was,
really?
or one of the other movies. It's
You
supposed to
know,
be written.
Out of Africa is just it's
Yeah.
not such a non-interesting movie to me. But go on, sorry.
Um, yeah, that's one of those
Yeah.
weird years. But I remember it did get screenplay. I'm pretty sure it got art direction, which is what production design was.
Well,
Uh,
I agree with that
and yeah,
100%.
yeah, it was just a different.
Time, I guess.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's every year. We never, the
Yeah.
best movies of the year are rarely nominated or win for the
Well,
Oscars.
you know how I feel about the Oscars, Peter.
I know we've had a lot to,
Yeah, I know that.
yeah, that
Don't
we
beat
could,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that horse there. But I will say, man, as far as what I was going to say about Brazil, because I literally lost my train of thought. Oh, yes, another compliment I have to the movie, that I think has to do uh, with the production design and with the setting being sort of this retro, but also sort of futuristic feeling. It doesn't feel like a movie made in the 80s. And also with Gilliam's style and the unique cinematography, like the wide angle lenses, the fisheye, the all the dolly shots and long establishing shots, very experimental and complex editing and camera work for an 80s movie. I couldn't pin it. I was like, this doesn't, if you told me this was made like in the late 70s or early mid 90s, I could believe it. Like, it doesn't feel like an 80s movie to me in that sense.
Yeah, I think there's a certain timelessness to it. It's not, it's not perhaps not Casablanca or the like, but it does sort of exist outside of the time period to some extent, just in
Hmm.
terms of what they were doing, and it doesn't. When people talk about the best movies of the '80s, this is not one that immediately comes to mind. I think, in
Yeah.
part because it just doesn't fit in as cleanly with the '80s, even though we have Blade Runner and RoboCop and Aliens and all these other science fiction. '80s is a fantastic decade for
Well,
sci-fi.
it's kind of like with the pop culture zeitgeist of things. There's the some of the great things that were made in a time, but then when people think of the list, like they also want to see it kind of evoke the sensibilities of the time. So I would say Brazil, is an 80s movie, but it doesn't really feel like an 80s movie.
Hmm.
It's kind of beyond that. And I think some of its themes definitely kind of reach more into the 90s and beyond, with obviously the use of technology and everybody kind of on a grid they can directly connect to. There's kind of like a early internet sort of thing with the databases there. So yeah, it's very yeah, it's definitely got some timelessness to it, which I think I've always thought is kind of one of the great signs of a great movie. It's one of the telling signs. Like when I talk about well, not really talk about when I think about The Godfather, for instance, it's not really brought up that much, I think, but one of my favorite things about that film is just how it's shot and presented. It doesn't really feel like a standard 70s movie, which I think is one reason why it's one of the great 70s movies, is because it just, yeah, if I couldn't directly pin when it was made right away, you know.
Yeah, it almost, I mean, it's set in the 50s and it almost feels like a 50s movies at times with I think the score just feels like something out of the 50s, and the color, the Technicolor.
Technicolor and
Uh,
the use of shadow, it's
yeah,
just it's the
yeah.
clarity of picture, and that's a whole different topic, but this is kind of in that line of just cinematography and presentation, it's I in terms of that, I think that there is some real greatness here,
Mhm.
on multiple levels. Yeah. Do you get a sense of how I feel about the movie? I still don't know if I exactly answered the question.
Yeah, I mean you're pretty much where I was the first time I saw this movie. It took me a few times of seeing it to really digest what they were doing and what was going on and how it was, what it was doing, and notice all the little, you notice a lot of things watching it for the first time that I didn't notice until maybe the second or third time. A lot of the production design and sets and the way that they they shoot the movie.
Oh yeah, that's just something I've been thinking about a lot more, just for my own, I guess, just
Hmm.
educational benefit, and I've been much more interested in really the last couple of years, just learning how the movies are made and how they kind of try to bring these ideas to life in a technical way. And when I'm blown away by how impressive something is, I'm like, yeah, like those behind the scenes, how did they do that, and how much work went into it, and it's just, I think that's just really cool artistry that I appreciate. And this is, I think, a good example of kind of film as art. Really, there's just so much going on there on a lot of levels. Little details, like I could think about. One of the little things we didn't touch on too much. What was his mother? I mean, like the ridiculous outfit with her hat is a shoe, man.
Yeah.
Or like this is the ridiculous, like this is the actual world here, and so it's goofy, but taken totally seriously. The food, it's been simplified in the menus. It's like there's no description, so I guess people don't care as much about reading. It's just pictures and they had numbers, and they don't actually serve. It's not what it looks like. It's just some sort of processed goo.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, and his mother is so obsessed with appearances and not aging that she's got that another iconic scene with Jim Broadbent just kind of like stretching out her face to get the wrinkles back, and as you go throughout the movie, her surgery is going better, so she's looking younger and younger, and then towards the end, adding in with the disturbing nature, one of the scariest scenes for me, actually, I guess maybe tying with identity or something, and maybe some Freudian stuff, I'm sure, is like he's on the run, and he ends up going to the funeral of his mother's friend, who her surgery keeps getting worse, and that's the joke, and she keeps getting mangled, and nobody cares. Oh, my procedure needed another procedure. It's just, it's goofy. But yeah, she's been de-aging and de-aging, and this time she's like this younger, beautiful woman who is just surrounded by all these guys that are just trying to get with her sexually, and he's calling out to like, mother, please help me, like save me, and she can't be bothered. Like,
Mhm.
like, no, like, I don't even know who you are. I can't be bothered. It was just like, that was one of the most disturbing elements. Wow, his mother, who now looks, completely different, does wants to be completely separated from him. Like, there's, whew, like that was just dark too. Like, there's some, like, I checked on Wikipedia. It's considered a dystopian drama, but I always thought it was considered a comedy, um, and I don't know. Like I did laugh, but so it was just because everybody. It's like there's that weird quirkiness with a lot of the Gilliam characters and how they act that pops in, but the whole tone of the movie is just it goes to some creepy places. It really does.
Yeah, I think the it's so absurd. It's surreal.
It's
It's
dreamlike.
yeah. It's so absurd that I don't think you can take it seriously. I think you have to just kind of just let it be, and
Yeah, I
is
guess
a
so. It just I know it's just it bounces a lot. I guess that's just that's kind of one of the weird things about it is the logic of how things work. Like the pillars coming out of the ground. What was a really interesting scene. Like yeah, that seems like something right out of a dream. Just and that's kind of how everybody interacts and how they talk, even though that's how things are. That seems that off-putting nature of how people interact and stare at each other. Those long pauses, dreamlike like that one famous scene in Inception that I think this movie, like a number of other movies, is much better about being dreamlike than Inception is. But that's another rant.
yeah, yeah.
Um, been there, done that. But yeah, man. Also, one little note I want to make before I think I'm out of it is another thing, possibly a minor theme as well in these sort of things is the reliance on technology in addition to routine because I that was also a scene I thought was kind of funny is he's late for work and that's another thing that's related to okay he slept in and that's relatable but no he didn't exactly sleep in he slept in because the clock malfunctioned and actually kind of stopped and the moment that it kind of resets itself gets the right time the blinds go up, the toaster oven starts going on. Of course, it's not working properly, but everything is like completely streamlined to the system, like of efficiency. Like you will get up now, his entire apartment's connected with everything else, every appliance. It's just, it's all one unit. It is all one unit that thinks it works well, but it doesn't. And when it doesn't work well, whatever, it works well. Damn it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's almost it's like a Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah, like the
The
Rube
yeah,
Goldberg,
yeah,
like
the Rube Goldberg like breakfast. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing, except it actually works there. Here at
Yeah, here it actually doesn't work that well. It's like they're pouring coffee on the toast. I'm like, oh wow. He could get it
yeah,
fixed, but I mean, they probably like, whatever. And then they'll end up taking his house, which they do. Um, Not the evilest character that Bob Hoskins has played, but he's up there, I guess.
no, but yeah, it's just sort of like yeah, it's the mundane evil of bureaucracy where he just won't fix the thing because he doesn't have to, and
It's like, oh, you don't have the right form? Well,
yeah,
then I'm
yeah,
gonna
and
take
he
your house
sort of yeah, he sort of resents him just for calling him out, and
for not following procedure.
yeah, and yeah, it's just yeah, escalates from there.
Also, another little touch just with design. I love that him and his Luigi stand-in have really exaggerated bills on their hats. Like they're so long. It's just the little
Yeah,
cartoony things there are just all the little touches to bring it, man. The quirkiness of the world. It's just really cool. But I think those are the last little thoughts that I had. So that's it in terms of all the things I initially, I guess, noted or thought about during the movie. I'll quickly look through my notes and see if I missed anything, but I think I got it all. Uh, do, 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 do. Yeah, yeah, that was actually pretty much it. I remembered them all somehow.
yeah, I would add since we're now talking about spoilers, Harry Tuttle's death by paper is one of my
Oh,
favorite scenes in the
oh,
movie. It
I'm
is
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm
yeah,
glad you brought that up because all right, I I was talking to somebody who was wondering if the film might have been pretentious, and I was thinking about okay, well, is this on the nose? Like, yeah, I mean, it's not exactly subtle, but it's not really beating your head with a hammer over it. Like, I get it, but it's not it's not being too preachy. It's just kind of moving along this world, and then we get to that scene where the man Peter, listen to me. The man is literally lost in paperwork. He is buried and then lost in paperwork. And then I was kind of like, okay, I get it. I get it. But at the same time, Uh, the sequence it also fits with the dreamness because you're like, what's happening? Is he really there? This figment heroic figure, but then literally he does get kind of slowly covered in paper that almost seems like it's sticking to him, gravitating to him, and then Sam goes to him, and then yes, you're right. That scene where he literally just kind of poofs and it's just paper, that was beautiful editing. Like I was okay. So but so you really like that scene. You don't think it's too much. You don't think that
I
the symbolism might be just pushing it just a little bit.
Oh, sure, but it's a dream, and that was a practical effect too.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
for what, however they did that,
yeah.
one piece of paper and then another. They didn't have, like, that wasn't CG. That was actual pieces of paper getting stuck to Robert De Niro as he slowly,
Falling and then just
yeah.
he is literally eaten by the bureaucracy and then spit out and destroyed. And I was like, okay. I mean, I feel like the whole movie kind of told me that, but that was a great sequence. I will admit, it was a well put together scene, and I did like that. Like, wow, he's buried in paperwork. That was kind of funny.
And that was a pretty definite hint that now we're fully in the dream.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
If you're like, oh, okay, maybe things are working out, that happening should be a pretty good hint that,
Maybe they're not.
yeah,
Also, I'm glad you brought it up because I think this is one of the better kind of I don't know if it's yeah, maybe underrated, but better non stereotypical Robert De Niro esque Robert De Niro performances. This is a really cool character. I like sort of this everyman HVAC repairman slash rebel terrorist guy. Uh, I really liked him. Very untypical of your standard De Niro cop gangster
yeah,
role.
yeah. He just wants to repair air conditioning.
I just wants
It's
to.
just,
And oh, actually, how he helps him get revenge on the
yeah.
repair
Oh
guys.
yeah.
Oh, that was awesome. Like when he goes out and he switches the pipes because they're everything's basically the cooling unit got messed up now, so the whole place is freezing and they're in suits to keep them warm. And he switches the pipes, and interestingly, the pipes are yellow and brown, and
Mm-hmm.
so you wonder what pipes they are, and you're thinking, "Oh, where is this going to go?" And then confirmed, yes, he fills their suits up with feces, and then they explode. And he's like, we gotta stick together, man." So that was
Yeah.
that I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty great. Which also was a hint, wondering about how like real this guy was because he just kind of showed up out of nowhere to sort of help him, which made me think, was that him that did it? It's one of those classic sort of things.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where most of the characters could possibly be figments of the main character's imagination,
Hmm.
but maybe they're not, and changes the reading depending on who is real, what is real. Um, you know,
Yeah,
it's complex, and there's a lot of different rabbit holes you could go down with this one.
absolutely. I feel
Um,
like you're right. This is definitely one that could benefit from rewatches.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's pretty much all the thoughts I have for it, Peter. Do you have any final things or questions or
I feel like we've covered pretty much everything. I do find the, ending happy, though a lot of people have taken me to task for that because he does achieve the best victory he could because he couldn't take down the system alone.
No, I agree that in a sense, yes, there was a victory there for him, and you definitely could read it that way, and I accept that. But my initial feeling watching it was that it was sad, and I don't know. There's a potential bleakness to it. Like I said, I think bittersweet is probably the best way to sum it up. But I do like the idea of kind of being sort of free within himself and his imagination and kind of sticking it to the man through his own way because he can't actually change the system, but he kind of changes his relationship with it.
Yeah, he finds the hope and happiness in the worst of situations, and it is, strangely reassuring, with the past year that we've had, and the,
Yeah,
we've all lived through this. Even with the end in sight, it still, feels too far away.
yeah,
But if you can find a little bit of happiness, sometimes that's enough to carry you through.
it can actually a little bit goes a long way with
Mm,
happiness, in addition to a lot of things. You're absolutely right. But all things said, man, I think this was a great movie to talk about, and possibly a very good movie. I don't know if I would say that it is automatic smacked into one of my
mhm,
favorites, but you suggesting it as a movie that I should have definitely seen. Totally get it. I think it's a movie I'd have to rewatch to appreciate more. I still am kind of on the fence if
mhm.
I am a real Terry Gilliam fan or not, because so far, I mean, I still really like 12 Monkeys the best, which
Okay.
I guess is a little more serious and straightforward than this movie.
Yeah.
But I'd have to watch that again and compare. I think there's this one's certainly more layered and
Mhm.
complicated, and obviously got the great art design and everything. But it's just that we talked about him before. It's like I'm just trying to figure out what my resistance to his stuff was, and I honestly think it's just all right. Clear this up for me, Peter. Who is behind the weird visuals in Monty Python? Because I the weird skits and animations, which I've never been a huge fan of. Does he do those? Did any of the art design stuff? Was he behind it? Like who?
Oh, I believe that was. I think that was him. I'm thinking. I
Because maybe it's
believe
the.
he was the first. I know. I mean, he wasn't the only animator.
Mhm.
But I believe that he was the Python style comes from Gilliam's.
Okay, I could have sworn that I thought that like he was a big part of their sort of art direction for the animation and stuff, which I was never like, never liked that as much. So maybe that's why I've kind of avoided his some of his films because I'm like I didn't think that the aesthetic style of that I would really be able to gravitate to, but I don't know. I like his use of his cam work and his art design for sets. Like I like a lot of things about it, and okay, so, uh, maybe I also get him mixed up with the who did you told me about this before, but who directed City of Lost Children?
Oh, Jean Pierre Junot.
Jean Pierre Jeunet. Okay, for I think I got them mixed up, and I don't know how I think that the weirdness of that movie kind of like affected the pacing. I don't know. I'd have to go back and check that one out again too. I think I liked it, but I don't know. There was just something about maybe my ideas about what his aesthetics were like that I didn't gravitate to. But I really liked this movie. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I would definitely say there's a lot of similarity in their styles, at least in this period.
I just remember a lot of the intense close-ups and weird,
Yeah.
zooming shots and stuff like that. The weird ambient, dreamlike qualities
Hmm.
there.
Yeah, yeah. If you like dreamlike movies, these are both directors that kind of deal in that medium to a certain extent.
Oh, also, see, I'm glad it keeps going because there is another thing. I was thinking about it because this is considered one of the great surreal films. I was thinking, when's the David Lynch moment going to be? And can you guess what mine was?
Ooh, no, what was?
The moment that felt most like a David Lynch moment to me was the singing telegram woman.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's
And
almost a yeah.
I won't even go into detail, but you know what I mean. Just the presentation of how she looked and the way it was done. I was just like, yeah, that seems like a random, like Mulholland Drive or Twin
Yeah,
Peaksy kind
it's a
of.
non sequitur that almost seems like it came out from another movie,
Yeah, it's like
but
this
it
is like what? But then you
yeah.
find out what it is, and actually, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I guess this is another weird thing about this world. Sure. Oh, and a question, quick. I always forget, and I feel bad about it. Um, it, what is it Jonathan Price?
Yeah, Jonathan
Okay.
Pryce.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I like him. I haven't seen him in that many movies, but he is pretty good. I always remember him from the one James Bond movie.
Yes, yeah, Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
I like as
was
a villain. Yeah, the news guy. Similar themes in some ways.
yeah, yeah.
He was also another one of the Monty Python guys, right?
No, he was I think he was sort of worked in the same circles, but no,
He
he
was
was
never
a
on Monty Python.
no.
Oh wow, I might be getting him mixed up with who's the um, who's the guy that's always hanging out with John Cleese?
Oh yeah.
I always he's the one guy I forget because there's Terry Gilliam, there's John Cleese, there's who's the guy who looks kind of like Gene Wilder? What's his name? What's his name? Peter.
Let me think.
Uh, he's uh
Palin.
always look on the bright side of life. He's that guy.
Yeah, I think that's Michael Palin, right?
I think that sounds correct. I'm not
It's
obviously
been
a
so
diehard.
long. Yeah, it's
It
been
might,
so long since I've seen
I'm just gonna look it up.
Brian.
Palin, yes. Who's Palin? Michael Palin. Yep, that's. Wait, is that the guy?
Yeah,
Oh
that's
no, I'm sorry. I'm
okay.
sorry. Eric Idle. Eric
Eric
Idle.
Idle. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Okay, but you're
Yeah.
right. Palin is another one of them. But um,
Yeah.
also side note, like Monty Python, but I started watching a little bit again and realized how much all of like meta commentary and humor and YouTube and skits kind of owes a lot to Monty Python. And it just kind of clicked for me when I was watching the opening credits and how they stop and comment. I was like, wow, I do that gag. That's a Monty Python thing. So
Oh yeah, Monty Python is probably the most influential comedy group of our time.
at least of like film and TV
Yeah, well,
related.
I feel like every nerd watched Holy Grail in high school, and
But that was like a standard thing. I never
yeah,
I always thought, okay, yeah, Monty Python's funny, but like actually thinking about the jokes and the humor and how much that informs just meta
hmm
humor is, I was like, wow, it never clicked until like the other day. But yeah, random side note,
yeah,
but yeah, Jonathan Pryce I thought was really good in this.
yeah, yeah. He's one of those. I think he's finally starting to get his due because
Finally.
yeah, I mean he got an Oscar nomination for The Two Popes last
Oh,
year.
oh, that's right. He was in that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean he's a great Bond villain too. Yeah, I think he's better than the movie he's in.
I agree. He's my favorite thing about that movie.
Yeah,
But uh, um, Michelle Yeoh though, she's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
There's good things. There's good things about it.
yeah. It's definitely the second best Pierce Brosnan Bond movie.
No love for Die Another Day. That's kind of awesomely bad, right?
Yeah, that's.
Well, look, you know what? That's a good place to leave off because two things here. I'll leave you with a nugget. There is another conversation I want to have with you. I don't know if it has to be recorded, but I wanted to ask you about it months ago, and it kind of relates to how I feel about certain movies and how I deal with it. And it was actually like a little bit of a crisis I had to deal with that I wanted to ask you about, get your opinion on, because I think you might appreciate where I'm coming from, but uh, I'm going to leave that ambiguous, so people may find out about that or not. But more specifically, some point, hopefully by the end of April here, we were supposed to do another
mhm,
sci-fi film that everybody, even my buddy, Gimli, James, you know him,
yeah, yeah,
even he, who's not like the biggest movie guy, was like, "What? You've never seen this movie?" So, Peter, everyone's been like, "What the f, Joe? What the f, Merlin? You've
yeah,
never you've never seen Source Code." So
yeah.
next time I have you on the cast, we're going to talk about some source code, and you're going to tell me why I should have seen it and why it's not one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time. And I'll get to talk about Eagle Eye again as my dumb excuse for the 50th time. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'll look forward to that. I have a lot to say about that too. So
Good. All right, everybody. Well, if you've still watched or listened to this point, thank you. Appreciate you stopping by. Peter, give me some time. Always love talking about movies and stuff with you, man. Thank you for recommending Brazil. I think this is definitely one of the great movies that I'm glad I can check off the list.
yeah, definitely important to see if you like film, you like science fiction, you like 80s movies. It's a
There's
important
a
piece of culture.
there's a lot, and I will say that it's definitely a movie you have to pay attention to, and it's gonna leave you thinking. It's not an easy watch. It's long.
Yeah.
That might be my one minor gripe with it is I thought it might have been a little long, but that, like I said, I was tired, so it's definitely one that I'm gonna have to revisit at some point. And I'll even tell you this, Peter. That here's my final thought about it. If you have any doubts about it, I felt to myself, I would actually like to buy this movie and own it and
Hmm.
get like some kind of special edition. I was like, this feels like one that's worth looking at again and discussing for sure.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you which of the various Criterion editions is the definitive one, but I need to figure that out. So I'll let you know once I
Yeah, let me know,
spend
man.
$100 on my eBay copy. And
Well, one of the
yeah,
nice things is, a lot of times people upload special features to places like YouTube. That's how I've watched a lot of stuff too. So hey,
yeah,
if
yeah,
it's
hey,
available, copyright free,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
let me know though what you find out.
yeah, we'll do.
All right, everybody, stay magical. Say goodbye, Peter.
Let's be careful out there.
Let's be careful.